Right now, we're going to have some fun talking about a golden period in Ottawa's music history, as we're joined on the phone this morning by broadcaster and author, CKCU alumnus as well, Ken Rockburn. Good morning, Ken.
Hi there, Matthew. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Good.
So, finally got the book out. Yes. Does that feel good?
Yeah, believe me, it really does. It was a long time, a long gestation.
Sure. Well, and you've been through putting out books before. But I think this was probably the longest time getting one out.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah. I started this one probably a little over 7 years ago, I think.
We are as the times are, the story of the Café Le Hibou. I had a chance to, while I was enjoying the swing music on Sunday, John Thompson had a coffee there. I was able to sit down and enjoy the book. And I'm not surprised. I mean, even the little bits I had a chance to look at, it was excellent. And I know that people are very excited about this. Let's maybe start back at the beginning, Ken, of Le Hibou and yourself. When did you first become aware of it?
I started going in 1963 when I was 16 years old. I went to see John Hammond Jr. play. And I had a date with me. And at the end of the first set, in fact, in the book, there's a picture of Hammond at that gig that he did on Bank Street at Hibou, taken by Jean-Marc Caris. But I had a date with me, and at the end of the first set, Hammond put his guitar down, and he stepped off the stage. Now, mind you, the stage then was like a little riser. It was only about 6 inches off the floor.
Right.
But he stepped off the stage, and he walked the length of this long room and sat down at my table and started hitting on my date, actually. And I was of two minds. You know, do I get insulted that he's hitting on my date, or am I just tickled pink that John Hammond was sitting at my table? And I chose the latter. That's
some good stuff. I remember seeing John Hammond when they had Nepean days, and
yes.
And he was late, and this was out at the bandshell out on the waterfront, and this taxi was driving across the grass, and people had to pick up their picnic chair, their chairs, and move to the side, and it was him. He came out. He got the taxi to drive right up to the bandshell. He got out and had no sound check. He just sat down and started to play. It was good stuff. That's in a big outdoor show. I can only imagine how good he was when he was younger and in a place in an intimate place like Le Hibou.
Oh yeah, I mean he was at that point he hadn't gone electric at that point. Well, he'd sort of gone electric. He was playing that sort of very slow electric blues stuff along with his acoustic stuff. But I remember his first few albums, which were all straight acoustic albums. It was amazing. This guy was amazing because he sounded like he was an old black blues singer from the Delta, you know, and he was this young white guy who came from New England. So it was astonishing.
That's an amazing show to see as a 16-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Were there other teenagers at Le Hibou at that time?
I suspect that there were. My buddies and I all went there quite regularly. I mean, it moved from Bank Street. It started out on Rideau Street. Denny Faulkner, who was the man who came up with the idea, he and a couple of his friends from University of Ottawa started it, and it was on the second floor of a house on Rideau Street, down past Chapel, sort of towards Friel. And they started it as a club, so you had to pay $2 for membership. And basically, all it was just a hangout. It was people went and played their own guitars and drank coffee, and they made the little dishes for people to eat and stuff like that. But it wasn't a club in the sense that we know clubs now. It was just kind of a hangout. And that lasted for less than a year. Then it moved to Bank Street near Nepean, upstairs, and that's where I first started going. And then in 1965, it moved from there to Sussex Drive, and it was on Sussex from 65 to 75 when it closed up. So, you know, it was at that point, my buddies and I started going when it was on Bank, and then everything shifted to Sussex, and that was 10 years of going to that place.
So I guess this was our sort of version of a village going on at the time.
Yeah.
Were there other places like Le Hibou, or was it unique at the time?
No, there were a couple of other places, but they weren't quite like Le Hibou. There was a club in the basement of the Anglican Church on Medcalf Street, called Le Monde. And in fact, I have Russell Barton, who ran it for a while. He's in the book talking about it because it was kind of an alternate thing. And that was more of it was a church-run thing, so they actually did some outreach for homeless people and that sort of thing, as well as having musicians come and play. But they were all local musicians. They didn't really have they didn't pay musicians to come and play. And occasionally, musicians like Richie Havens and guys like that, if they were in town playing at Hebrew, they would go over and do a set or two at Le Monde. And then there was another one at the University of Ottawa, which Russell then went and managed, called The Wasteland. And they, too, had musicians. And I think they got paid, though if they did, they didn't get paid very much. One of my favorite stories in the book was the fact that Neil Young wanted to play at Le Hibou. And this was just before he became big. And Harvey Glatt was the sort of silent partner of Denny Faulkner's at Hebrew, and Harvey was doing a lot of the booking as well, or some of the booking. Denny was doing a lot of it. But Neil Young wanted to play, and Harvey wouldn't book him because he didn't think he'd have much of a career because he didn't have a very good voice, and took him over to the Wasteland and had Russell book him into the Wasteland. So when Neil Young came back, and he did play Hebrew after John Russo bought it from Denny Faulkner, Neil Young came back and Russo booked him. And in fact, John Russo's ex-wife, who I know quite well, has a tape of that particular night, that concert, and in between songs, Neil is tuning his guitar, and he looks up and says, I'd like to thank Harvey Glatt for not booking me. He didn't think I was going to have much of a career.
So, I mean, this is obviously a pretty spectacular time in music, and because you've got a lot of different styles of music, world-class performers, all coming, to a small club.
Yeah.
Did it feel like a special time for you? I mean, you're a teenager; everything feels special.
Well, it's funny. Most of the people that I talked to for this book, and I talked to probably, 85, 90 people all in all, and everybody says, think of what we saw. And at the time, I guess we kind of realized at the time, but in retrospect, it's even more astonishing that you could go and see Dr. John or Van Morrison or Joni Mitchell or Gordon Lightfoot, and you're paying like $2, $2.50, And even then, at the time, some people were angry that they had to pay that much money.
Sure, and these guys are amazing at that time. I can imagine. Now they're pretty good, and they're in their 70s, and you're on a big stage watching them on a screen.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and here you were sitting in this little club. The Sussex Street capacity was maybe 150 people tops, and they were playing on this stage against that legendary brick wall that was there, and you're sitting right in front of them. It was astonishing.
That is so good. Now, was it tough to track down people to talk about these stories, or did they start coming to you once word got out that this book was coming together?
They started coming to me after a while. It's one of those things that kind of snowballs, and at first I knew that all the owners were still alive, and I know most of them, not all of them, but I knew most of them. So I talked to all the owners first, and then I started talking to musicians, talked to all the local guys, and people like Nev Wells and Sandy Crawley and Beezy Waters and David Whiffen and Bill Hawkins. All those people did talk to them, and in some cases multiple times. Like there's a whole chapter devoted to Bill Hawkins, and because he was kind of critical to the success of that place. And Bill and I would have lunch together quite frequently, and I would always have a tape recorder with me because he would always remember something different at every lunch. I mean, it was like that. It was sort of like a lot of these interviews is shaking the 8-ball. People have these spotty memories, and then suddenly they'll go, "Oh, wait, I remember this." It was that kind of thing. Or you should talk to this person about that, and so it did kind of feed on itself. And even at the book launch at Irene's back in the middle of September, I had people coming up to me and saying, "God, you should have talked to me." Sure, I could have done that forever and never actually started writing the damn thing. I have a friend, actually, my friend David McDonald made this suggestion. I think it's a great one. He said, whenever you're doing something like this, you should have a fake book launch 2 years before the real book launch. And all these people will come and say, well, you should have talked to me, and then you can gather all those stories together and actually publish a book.
Sure. Well, I guess when you get that sort of second edition, maybe you can add a few more in.
Oh, Lord, no, that's it. I'm finished with this.
Or pass that on to future generations of Rockburns to look after.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, you're talking about the local music scene, because Le Hibou, that's also part of what's going on. It's not just the Dr. Johns coming to town. Yeah. There's a pretty thriving scene in the city that is tying in with music here as well. Tell us a little bit about the kind of people that were local and were part of this.
Well, I mean, of course, you had the beginnings of some amazing careers there. There was a band called The Children, and that was made up of Bruce Coburn, Nev Wells, Sneezy Waters, Sandy Crawley, and late Ricky Patterson on drums. And I think I have a picture of one of their posters in the book. Those guys all sort of could have had amazing careers of their own. They were all, and still are, excellent musicians. And they were kind of they became at one point the focal point of Lohibu. They were the hip guys. They were the cool guys, you know, and they knew it. I mean, and it's interesting when I talked to each one of them about being in that band. They all said the problem with it was that each of them thought that they were the leader, you know, and so there were all these kind of personality clashes that went on. So even though the band was great and they had great music, it didn't last all that long. These guys all went off onto their own, and of course Bruce went on to the amazing career that he's had. There were the Modern Rock Quartet, the MRQ, played. Heaven's Radio, of course, which, you know, I always refer to them as the second best rock and roll band in the world after the Rolling Stones. I loved Heaven's Radio. Terry Gillespie's still around. All of those guys played. And towards the end of the life of the club, you got another generation of musicians starting to come in. So, you know, Ian Tamblyn and those guys, Bob Stark, Bob Soucy. There were a bunch of guys who played there. And sometimes these guys would open for, like, the larger acts. I know Bob Soucy opened for John Prine one time and that sort of thing. And so it was a combination of, you know, big names coming in and local people playing too, because that was the idea of the club, to foster that kind of local musical scene. And at the time, of course, it was going from folk to rock, and it was a really quite lively scene that was going on at the time. I mean, you could go down there and catch, as you said earlier, catch just about any kind of music that you wanted to at that club at one point or another.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, I love jazz, but often people, like, they either love it or they won't go to it. Here you've got a club that can do jazz and do other things. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. And they still managed to fill the place all now. Now, they, you know, none of these guys, I should point out, that ran this club over the entire 15-year life of it, nobody made any money. Nobody made a cent. I mean, Denny Faulkner worked for 8 years at that place. He came up with the idea, he created it, he moved it to 3 different locations it was in under his tenure. But he got a job working as a floor director at the CBC, and that was how he paid his bills. The rest of the time, he's running this club and not making any money at all, like no money. It's astonishing. So it was done. The same thing with John Russo and his wife, Joan, when they took it over for 4 years, and then Pierre-Paul Lafreniere and Daphne Burks were the final owners, and all of them were doing it just for the love of the music and the scene. Nobody was doing it for money because there wasn't any to be had.
That's pretty amazing. I encourage you guys to head out, pick this up. We are as the times are. Where can people find the book, Ken?
Well, you've mentioned the Record Center. John Thompson's place several times. I did a reading and a signing there on Saturday, in fact. So John has some at the Record Center. Ian Boyd at both of his compact music stores has it. Books on Beechwood, which is, of course, on Beechwood, has it. Perfect Books on Elgin has it. And I'm selling it also through a website, my website, which is www.weareasthetimesare, all one word, weareasthetimesare.com.
That is excellent. Ken, CKCU turns 40, November the 14th.
Wow.
Amazing, eh?
It's incredible. I feel so old.
Well, you knew the place right at that time.
I did.
Yeah, and thank you very much for all you've done for CKCU.
Not at all.
Very cool to learn more about Lohibu. I was just a tiny bit too young to catch the tail end of it. I knew about it, but they weren't going to be letting me in at that point. That's excellent. I look forward to reading the whole thing and getting those stories. I'm sure many of you out there listening do as well. What have you got on your next project?
You know, I haven't even thought of that yet. I'm actually retired from work, so I'm not even working in TV anymore. So right now, I'm doing nothing but walking the dog. That
is excellent. I wish I was doing that right now. All right. Thank you very much, Ken.
Okay, Matthew.
All right. Bye for now. That is broadcaster and author Ken Rockburn, CKCU alumnus, and of course, Shea 106, CBC. He's done many things, and his new book is called We Are As the Times Are. And you can pick that up, as Ken mentioned, at places like the Record Center, or you can go over and see Ian Boyd at Compact Music. Fabulous stuff. I just had a chance to peruse it, and just excellent. You'll find out a lot about Ottawa's music scene.